We'll start off with the pledge. First of all, I'd like to take and thank the selectmen for taking our invitation to end up coming to a joint meeting to take and talk about the budget. Over the course from February till the 21st, the advisory board met on a number of occasions with the public and finalized what their version was. In the interest of time, it's going to only be the two boards that will be discussing the budgets. We got all our inputs during our budget reviews and also the open session. Both boards basically have agreed that the budget process in the past, long past, has not really been followed. And we're trying to, in this coming year, we're going to try to adhere to that. Because within it, it has the necessary checks and balances that you need to do a budget process. That budget process is spelled out in the municipal calendar, a guide to finance management for town officials, and lastly, the Finance Committee Handbook. All of these documents, by the way, are on the advisory board website for the town. In addition, we also end up trying to take it abiding by the town bylaw. So to start the process off, we asked for the selectmen to meet with us in the first step on trying to get back on track within the budget process. Next year, they'll be kicking off the budget process. Basically, they are the executive portion who gathers, ends up going through the budgets, hands them off to the advisory, which we act as the House Ways and Means, and the advisory board presents to town meeting, which is the legislative body, and they vote on the budgets. So that's really the process in itself that many towns follow. Unfortunately, like I said, we've lost our way. We haven't necessarily followed the process correctly. In addition to that, this is, to me, is a kickoff for even next year. We're hosting a joint meeting between the selectmen and the advisory board this year. I would hope that the selectmen would kick it off next year and also have a joint meeting and chair that one. Is our hope that, and our recommendation, that the selectmen consider a tri-meeting sometime in the future. What's a tri-meeting? That means the Board of Selectmen, the advisory board, and the school committee. This budget is not just a town budget. It incorporates the school also. So it's quite important that we end up working as a community to get a budget that both entities can end up living with. It can't be one-sided or the other. So with that, I'm going to end up making just a slide, because I've been asked by a number of folks to give a cursory overview of what the impact is to the tax rate. This is not necessarily the final say. It's still there's a number of issues that I know the accountant's got to be working with Southwest on the debt exclusion, if it passes, on how to structure that. This is just a cut at what it would look like as an idea. So, if you can. I'm going to start out with the 14 budget. This is basically how, on a conservative view, how it will affect the taxes. If you scroll all the way to the top, please. Passed in October due to the school increase assessment, the 620, which basically adds $1.15 to the tax rate, which last year was $14.12. So it's showing what the average bill impact of that override. Oh, by the way, for every $540,623 of increase, that's a $1 increase on the tax rate. We've checked with the deputy assessor to make sure we have the correct number here. The May 5th ballot, as far as the May 5th questions, is on talking about the town's structural deficit of 505. That represents 93 cents on the tax rate. So you can see incrementally it added between the $1.15 and the 93, it added $2. It will add $2.08, giving us a tax rate of approximately $16.20. And that would be the average impact to the average tax bill. If you go up and see the school schematic design, the debt exclusion, this is still being worked by our accountant with Southwest on how to best structure this. I only gave 2 scenarios. Doesn't necessarily mean either one of these scenarios is going to be the final. We're looking to take and have the least impact for the tax rate. The first one shows if it's done, all debt exclusion would be 92 cents all in 1 year. The second is a band over 5 years, and it's about 7 cents. Starting, we're not sure when it's going to end up starting. Like I said, it will depend on how we work with Southwest from the accountant's position. So somewhere between $16.27 to $17.13 is to give you an idea where we would end up being for 14. And you see the average home value, that's taken off the state website. The average home value in Templeton is $167,564, which would increase based upon the higher number, would increase the budget that much, and you also on 100,000. That's for 14. Let's talk about 15, because I was also asked about 15. Well, 15, as you see, we still have the override, which is $1.15. Prop 2.5 says you go up 2.5%. That's with 219,000. That adds another 41 cents automatically. Then you have the snow and ice deficit, which is approximately $53,000, and that adds about 10 cents to the tax rate. So if we just talk about those there, without some of the ballot questions, it adds $1.65. That's not really that much increase per se. If you look at the ballot question, for the structural deficit, that's still 93 cents. It brings it up to 16.70. And lastly, again, those two scenarios where we do all of it or over a 5-year period. It may even be 7 years. And it may not necessarily hit in 15 when I was talking to the accountant. It all depends on how, when they talk to Southwest, on how to structure that if it passes. So that would give you a basic idea of what the impact was. Does that satisfy, I know Mr. Dennis, does that satisfy at least some idea of what the impact is? And I know you were one of the people that had asked me about that. Okay. Going on, we're going to end up talking about the criteria.
Point of order? You had a question over here?
We're not taking any questions, Bob. We basically said that this is...
Well, you had the news reporter had a question.
We're not going to take any questions. This is basically a working session between the selectmen and the advisory board.
Well, it's the news.
For the interest of time, we need to take and end up going through this. I don't want to end up bogging the meeting down. One of my members will now be talking about the criteria that we used to end up establishing two budgets, because we have one with the override and one without. And they're quite extensive, so that's why we're trying to take and end up, in the interest of time, is to take and end up holding it to no questions from the audience or the department heads at this time. I have not got any handouts. We're being very frugal in the fact that that's why we're putting them up, so everybody can see them. These are all in draft form, the budgets. They haven't been voted on, so they haven't been passed out. After this meeting, whatever is voted on will be passed out.
Yeah.
All right, you all set, Will?
Aye?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really difficult to stay.
We didn't do the setup.
All right, I apologize for the delay in getting the thing up. You know, I do this every day at work, and I can't figure out how to do it here, so, yep, if you can. Yeah,
Right here on the outside, about here. Out here on the outside.
This?
No,
No, that's bright. I have
The
no
facing
idea.
wall, I think.
Mark is pointing to that.
Ooh, good job. Wow. That's the one we need, yeah.
We need, the other two can go back on, or I can,
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. It goes together. Ew. There we go. It's amazing how technology works. Anyway. All right, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the process we took in getting to our budgets. And I know some of you, as you go through this, you know, you may look at it and you may go, wow. And you may go, what do I do? Anyway, I have to tell you that going through a budget and cutting the amount of money that we had to cut from the budget was not an easy process. It's not easy by any means at all. And we're trying to cut, we're trying to keep essential services available and still move on and have a working budget. So I'll walk through this presentation and show you what we did. So this was the process, as Will said, basically. We didn't follow the normal process. It hasn't been followed for the last couple of years, but originally in November, we met with the Board of Selectmen, and at that point in time, the board basically said to us, go off and do the budget. So that's what we did. We went off and started the budget process. We requested budgets and information from every one of the departments in town so that we could start putting things together. And we started holding meetings, as many of you attended, for each one of the different departments. And people brought in their supporting material and whatever else they had. And we put all the budgets together. And then we started budget deliberations a few weeks ago and started working the budgets. Basically, we have two different budgets. We felt that it was important that we have a budget with the override and a budget without the override, because no matter what happens, we have to have a budget. And even if the state were to come in, I think they'd be looking to us to have a budget to put forth to them so that they could look at it and they could approve it. How did we do the budgets? Well, we looked at some other communities, we looked at some of their departments, we looked at how they were organized, and we looked at how much money Templeton was spending in respect to those other cities and towns. We tried to look at towns that were same structure, kind of the same size as Templeton, and compare those to what we had. So, we didn't take the approach of cutting across the board. We didn't feel like that was the right thing to do. Would have been the easy thing to do, by the way. We spent probably 100, 200 hours, I don't know, talking about budgets, whatever, a lot of time doing it, but we didn't think that that was the right way to approach it. We actually felt that it was important that we look at each and every line item in the budget, talk about each and every line item, and try to figure out the best results for the town of Templeton. So a lot of this budget that we had is based on consolidation of operations. And that means consolidation in a lot of different ways. Without consolidation, basically, we wouldn't be able to adequately fund the operations of the town.
And one thing we want to say is that the selectmen have already chosen to end up moving and probably consolidating some of the office space into another building.
Okay, and the unfortunate part about all of that, in the end, is that when you start consolidating and you start reducing the amount of money that you have, some staff reductions become necessary. But again, I want to make sure everybody understands that we went through this line by line by line in an attempt to try to figure out what the best budget was for the town. Okay, so one of the first ones we did was we looked at the cemetery and the highway departments. Whoops, sorry. I went too fast. First one was the treasurer collector. And we looked at a number of towns that are similar to Templeton, and we looked at how they were doing the treasurer and the collector positions, and how they were doing the assistant treasurer and collector positions. And somewhere in the vicinity of 70-80% of the towns, similar to Templeton, actually combine the offices of treasurer and collector. Templeton currently has 4 employees and 2 offices. What we found was other towns were paying higher salaries, but using fewer employees. And the goal with this basically is to result in improved bookkeeping, better collection, reduced expenses for payroll, reduced expenses for tax bills. But it does require higher salaries for qualified personnel. I will say in this particular area that the savings in combining these positions are actually very minimal. What we were trying to do in this particular area was to create a salary, basically a salary structure that would allow us to get the people that we need in the positions that we need. Be able to pay the people enough to make it worthwhile for them to work in those positions. So that's what we did with the collector and the treasurer. Now I'll go on. Cemetery and highway. You know, we looked at a lot of towns, and a lot of similar towns have a DPW. We don't have that. And we looked at one, for example, is Shirley. And if you look, you can see Shirley, for the way they're structured, including the street lighting and snow removal, is $529,000. And if you look down towards Templeton and you look at the way we do it, right now, we're spending $973,000, a significant amount of money more. Now, one of the things in here that I will say right now is the advisory board as a board doesn't have the ability to combine departments or consolidate departments. However, this is a suggestion from us. This is what we feel is a reasonable solution to do this, to actually have the operations of the two departments together and make the appropriate changes. And we do feel there's a significant amount of money that can be saved.
Just add to that is, we've asked the interim town administrator to look at this because we found no reference to the cemetery department in the town bylaws. And we were looking at that and the Board of Health because there's no reference to either of those in the town bylaws, as far as bylaws. So we've asked them whether or not, through town council, that something like this can be done because of the fact that you have boards that are presently sitting.
I spoke with town council, posed those questions. They discussed the larger consolidation of DPW, and they discussed a more limited consolidation. If the town were to go forward with a larger consolidation, highway, cemetery, water, and sewer, that would require a special act, require town meeting approval and a special act. On a more limited basis, two departments that are not established in state law through a special act is the question. I don't have a response back from Mr. Durensis at this point. I talked with him on the phone about it. He said he would send a response. I don't have it yet. Probably, if I don't have it tomorrow, I'll have to get on the phone and get him to come back with it. At a minimum, it's going to require town meeting approval. It might require a ballot question. But like many towns, in the bylaws, you do not have setting up of the structure of town departments. They're just traditional. You know, from the 19th century, this is the way they were set up. And so you don't have that written into your bylaws. And that's, I guess that's the nub of the issue there. Clearly, you don't have to go to Boston, though.
Now, one of the things that we did notice is that the recreation department is in the bylaws. So that was our question, as to why one is versus the other.
Could be because there's a state statute for most departments. Most of the state statutes for municipal departments are rudimentary. Recreation's a little more complicated.
Okay, moving on. And this, by the way, is the result of what we would feel of bringing together the two departments with an approximate savings of $150,000. Rationale for consolidation of administrative assistants. Well, you know, as long as we continue forth and we start consolidating into a single office, it gives us an opportunity to make some adjustments there. Town administrator, Mr. Barkle, at one point had stated that he thought the offices, as the selectmen's office as it is today, could run with a single assistant. Yeah, I agree, that's probably true. But what we looked at was actually adding a second assistant into the selectmen's office. And then other boards would give up their assistants, and the department heads and managers would use that other assistant in the selectmen's office to assist them. Because they're in the same building and everything, it would be much easier to consolidate resources and people and get things done all together. And likewise, the phones, if there was not an administrative assistant for a particular department and they weren't in the office, their phone would ring and then it would ring over in the selectmen's office, so it would be picked up there by somebody to be able to answer.
I believe that's a very good model. I know a number of towns have, aside from staff in the selectman's office, they have someone called town secretary who provides services to all the municipal departments.
The benefit of that is that presently, if somebody's out of the office there's no one to answer the phone. If it was done through a new telephone system, one very similar to what the senior center is looking at, and thanks to the senior center for looking at that, that could be handled through one phone system and answered, and actually, like many other communities, it's answered, and you can end up then forwarding that to whoever is another extension, as an example.
It's a way to use our people in a much more efficient manner. Board of Health, the health agent. The recommendation from us is to eliminate the full-time health director and move on to a per diem agent. Again, we compared with other towns, and there were different budgets all over the place. We picked Shirley, and their budget is $54,000. Again, if you look at that going in that direction, it's a savings of about $67,000. Moving on to the building inspector office, again, the same type of thing. We recommended that reduce the hours for the building inspector by about 50%. Again, eliminate the administrative assistant and use the assistant in the Board of Selectmen's office. And right now, what they have is the building inspector has different funds actually for wiring, plumbing, and gas inspectors. And we recommend actually that they consolidate that under professional services so he can move that money to whichever one of those professional services needs the most money, because you can never tell from year to year how much each one's going to need.
One of the problems that we saw this year here is that they had used up the funds, and I believe it's the electrical inspectors, and they have an issue with that budget. They had combined them. There was excess money in the gas and plumbing. If it was all in under one particular category, it wouldn't have made any difference. There would have been enough money for them to use for either one.
I think combining that all together makes sense. It ends up in a savings of slightly less than $50,000. Now, there's a couple of departments we looked at, and we thought that we really weren't spending enough there. And the first one is the library. You know, the library has been operating on a shoestring budget for years, barely surviving, barely making it. And I think we've reached the point with the library that we either have to fund it enough so it's not a shoestring budget, or we have to close it because it doesn't make sense. So what we're suggesting is an increase, and not a large increase, but an increase, so that they can actually get certified and they don't have to run on the shoestring budget. Now they have two shoestrings. So not a huge increase, but enough that we feel will keep the library going in a better and more efficient manner. And then the Council on Aging. You know, one of the things we talked a lot about the Council on Aging because of what it is. It's a big budget increase this year. But you know, we just spent, I don't know what we spent, but I know we had a $500,000 debt exclusion, plus whatever they spent on top of that, to open up a senior center that the citizens of Templeton voted for. And because of that, we're recommending that we fund the senior center sufficiently enough so that we can actually open up that center. It would be terrible for us to have a brand-new senior center that we can't open the doors on. So what were the differences between the override and no override budget that we recommended? The biggest difference of them all is the cuts to public safety, because even though we don't show them here, as you'll see in the budgets themselves, even these changes were not enough to make up for the difference in what we needed to have. And so we had to make other cuts. We made those to public safety, to fire, police, and communications. With the override, we're actually able to keep those budgets funded much better than we would be without the override. So that's really the difference. We're still recommending these changes if we get the override. You know, we've been spending a lot of money in the past few years, and we've got to bring ourselves a little bit more under control. And that's it. That's how we got to where we're going.
First FY15 budget. So,
Which one do you want, Will?
15. We'll talk to the green sheet first. The next thing that we'll be talking about is the FY15 green sheet, which is basically the town budget before we go on to the revenues and expenditures. This is without an override. This is where you see major cuts in order to end up getting to where we need to be.
It's the right one.
We're getting the people some copies.
It is. That's the top. Oh, it's not it. Son of a gun. I can see that. Okay.
For the moderator, when asking him for a budget, he had nothing to put in, so we have nothing. The next department would be the selectmen's. As you can see, that we anticipated that the fact that we're now going to a town administrator versus a coordinator. In order to be somewhat competitive in that, we actually put in a larger amount so that we can end up getting a qualified candidate. We actually looked at a number of communities around our area. And we found that they were basically in the $70,000 to $75,000 range. If you look at, as an example, Orange is one of the communities that we looked at. As you see, we ended up putting in for the office salaries. That's for two people. The selectmen's office expenses.
We can't see those numbers
We
from
can't,
here,
you're not
so
saying, telling us
if you
anything.
don't tell us what the numbers are, we...
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. For the town administrator, it's 80,000 versus what was asked for, 70,636. For the selectmen's office salary, they requested $59,115. We put in $60,000. For the office expenses, and there was a couple of expenses that we questioned, and they had initially put in $14,000, and we ended up, there's two items that we thought, after talking with them during the budget review, it came down to $12,000. $500 for the personal administrator, and the audit expense, which we're still waiting for a figure because we have to take it, end up going out to bid, isn't that correct?
It's a good idea to do that, but this year, we got a late start, and I had a discussion about getting an auditor, and there was a fair amount of pessimism that we could actually get one because they've signed up their work. I called Sullivan and Rogers, based, I believe, in Burlington, very reputable firm. They said they would be able to do it. I asked for a cost estimate. They asked for a copy of the most recent audit, and I told them that we didn't have a most recent audit. They wanted it electronically, and so this played out with us sending them copies of the audits for fiscal 12.
That's correct.
Holly here?
Yeah.
Holly sent, I think, fiscal 12 and maybe fiscal 11. I don't have a quote from them at this point.
Right, the one I'm most familiar with is 12. That was the last one that was done. So that's the selectmen's office. The advisory board.
One other point. I noticed that on the warrant, there's a citizen's petition to have 13 and 14 audited. I think we will be in the ballpark for fiscal 14 with the budget that we have in fiscal 14, but we have no appropriation for fiscal 13 if that article carries. So we'll, I don't know, they have to...
There was money in the 13 budget for that.
Was that closed out, though? Was that closed out?
That I don't know.
Well, we're going to have to, if that passes, we're going to have to look at stabilization, yes.
The advisory board expenses, we actually cut our expenses down to the bare minimum as to what we actually need. We looked at how many town and special town meetings we had and what the cost is, and the cost has gone up to us. This year here, we're just about spending our entire allotment, including for the annual town finance. We actually have to pay for, they can end up joining that, and it provides us with being able to go to training. The emergency reserve last year was 30,000. We've used better than 50% of that now, and we still haven't got to the end of the year, and we know at least one pending bill that's probably in the vicinity of $4,000 to $5,000. The emergency reserve went up because if we end up cutting the budget on everywhere else, we know that we're going to end up at some point at the end of the year having to address that and not to have enough money. We actually looked at a number of other communities, and some communities have as much as 100 to 150,000. We didn't see that that's something that we want to take and recommend. We did an increase there in anticipation that some of the budgets are going to end up having to be supplemented at some particular point.
What's that figure?
What is the figure?
As a town accountant,
What's the figure?
50.
50,000.
50,000.
Thank you.
50,000.
You can't see it. Jeans.
For the town accountant's salary, they put in 30,500. We have it as 30,250. That was last year 500. They put in 30,250. For forensic accountant, they put nothing in, and we felt that wasn't correct. Especially after this last year when we've had to have a forensic accountant come in and look at the books. So from zero, we put it to $1,000. And for the accountant's expense, rather than $1,000, we put that as 500. They had asked for 1,000. Assessors. This is where we end up starting to consolidate. They had asked, and this had the deputy assessor and an assistant at $58,377. That's what they requested. Because this is no override, we saw that we could only end up supporting just the deputy assessor at $44,000. They had asked for office expenses of $8,090. We put in $7,500. For their overall budget, $51,500. And the treasurers, this is where we start to combine in the treasurer collectors. Last year we had $35,000 for just a treasurer. In looking at other communities, we see that, and we call it basically, you call it the sweet spot, is somewhere between $50,000 and $55,000 for a person that does that dual role. We looked at a number of communities, all about the same size. Because one of the things you can end up going on the state website, go to their thing and actually call up the size communities you want to look at. We looked at between 7,000 and 9,000, which we're exactly in the middle, at 8,050 people at last census. So that's basically what that is paying somewhere else, if we want to get somebody who's qualified. That would eliminate the assistant, going from 10,000 down to 0,
Once again, what is the number?
and the 10,000 to 0 is the requested, and going from 10,900 to 0. Town treasurer's office expense, 7,635 was requested. 5,500 is what we put in. Harper's payroll was requested as 12,000. We put in 12,000. But we also have a question on this. Can it be done under our existing software system, VADAR? What would be the cost to end up bringing it in-house? We don't have an answer. We have a question on that. And could we end up doing like one other community, is get a payroll clerk? Limited time, maybe an hour or two, a week or whatever. But we still left that on for 12,000, saying, okay, we're still gonna go out to Harper's. Lastly, tax taking expense. 3,500 was asked, 3,500 was put in the budget. The treasurer would be, the budget would be 76,000. The collector, for the town collector's salary, requested $39,321, because we had given a criteria based upon what we had heard from the selectmen about -2%. A lot of the departments adhered to that. We had some departments that actually asked for an increase. So we kind of try to balance that out.
What I just want to make note of here is, we've got the town collector salary, but this is actually becoming the assistant collector treasurer. This is really the assistant collector treasurer. We didn't bring them together because we can't really bring them together, but this would really be the assistant treasurer collector salary.
For all intents and purposes, we couldn't bring them together on the budget. We had to keep them separate, is what he's saying. The assistant town collector, we would eliminate that position. They had requested $11,988. We put zero in. So you would have a treasurer collector and assistant treasurer collector. The town collector's office expense requested $10,936. We put in $9,000 for this budget. CMT certification, our present collector is eligible for that. I don't know if once we join those two, whether that person would be eligible or not. But we thought that I believe it's last year, that was not put in the budget, and we didn't put that in the budget also. Tax lien expense, $3,500. Same thing, we kept that across, because those two items, both tax taking and tax lien, is for those folks that are not paying their taxes. Those give us the ability to put a lien on the property and also go and start the tax taking process. So that budget for the collector is $56,500. Town council, last year was budgeted $52,000. We're well within budget, and we're recommending going from $52,000 to $45,000. Town clerk's salary, she requested $40,538. We actually went back to the amount that was paid last year. It's on last year's budget. It's $41,100. The assistant town clerk's salary, she asked for $9,214. We basically eliminated that and said we couldn't do that. The town clerk's office expense, $24,600 is requested, and that's because we have state elections, both primary and the state elections happening later on this year. That's why there's an increase. So that is funded for the full $24,600. Yes. Yes.
We were talking about the town clerk's hours, and I believe we were going to try to restore them to the 40 hours. Has that been done?
She didn't put in for 40 hours. She put in for the same hours she had last year.
All right, but I thought one of our goals was to try to even that out, so that everyone was at 40, so that when cuts or whatever were made, it was equitable and it wasn't.
We couldn't do it on this budget. This is the one with no override. Planning conservation, the elimination of the assistant in that department is $3,225.96. We eliminated that position because we felt we could combine that with another office and actually get more coverage rather than the 5 hours that individual spends now. The Conservation Commission expense is $500. They requested $600. For an overall budget for them is $500. Planning board. Planning board assistant, they requested $18,000. Under the no override, we put in $15,000. That's $3,000 down. Planning board expense, they requested $15,400, and that was for going to a master plan. We ended up going back and put on the budget $6,400, the same as they had last year. For a total of $21,400. Board of Appeals expense. Last year, budget had $200. And looking the budget to actual, this board hasn't even spent any money at all. But we put in $100 because we figured that they would actually have to meet at some point and have some expenses for at least advertising when in fact, they're meeting tonight for the first time this year, from what I understand. Scroll down. Town building office rent, last year was budgeted $52,000. Since we are moving out of the existing location, we put 0 in. But in doing that, we said we still have a building that whatever building we're going to go into, there's going to be some level of expenses in that building. If you look at the town building expenses, the request was what, $44,000? That is $40,000 on our budget. The town building repair and maintenance, they asked for $9,000. We actually took the amount of rent and said, between them all, we're going to put in $51,250. That's to end up giving them the ability to end up doing what they need. If it's East Templeton, that money can be used to end up making upgrades. Well, the overall total is $91,250. That's actually going down in the amount of money. Town reports and street listing expense, $1,500. It's still $1,500. Last year, I believe, we went to Montechusett Regional School, and they ended up doing our printer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. So that expense is still there. I mean, when you think about how much we spend for that, that's very reasonable to have them do that for us.
Well, I know you said no questions, but if we don't go, you're saying if we go to East Templeton. If we don't go to East Templeton, could you please tell me where we're going?
I can't, that's up to select.
Well, then don't you think it would have been feasible to at least allocate some money for rent of somewhere? I mean, right now, we're up the street. I mean, come on. You know what? We're half us in here, town officials, need a place to work out of. I know you said no questions, but come on, enough's enough. Where's the plan B for the location?
The Board of Selectmen has already voted to move into East Templeton, and the process of beginning the work that needs to go into that, such as having it tested for lead paint, things along those lines, have already begun. The terms that the landlord was demanding, we were not able to comply with, so our only option at this point is East Templeton. It's not a permanent, it's not saying it's a permanent town hall, it's anything, it's just somewhere to house offices in somewhere until we can have the time and the stability to know where we actually want to go permanently. So things such as the handicap accessibility waiver has already been applied for. Those steps have already been taken place so that we can move through with that.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
And looking at that, from our perspective, from the advisory board, it was better for us to put in money into a town asset, which even after if we decide to move out of that building at some point, would upgrade that building and it makes it more saleable for us to either use it for a different function within the community or sell it. That's something that we see could happen in the future. Town vehicles, gasoline expense, requested $61,200. We put $59,000 in. And you'll see this later on as to the reasoning why we actually lower that, in addition to no override. For the diesel fuel, they had requested $61,200, we put $59,000. Town vehicle fuel expense, they asked for $5,000, and that's basically to take and pay for diesel fuel tax. We figured that would probably come out of the actual diesel account. So that's lowered from $130,000 down to $118,000. Town travel, on both budgets you'll see that we have nothing in town travel. That would be in each individual person's budget for traveling. General insurance. In in the last fiscal year, we had $235,000. The quote that our interim administrator had is $217,497. We kept that at $217,497. Unemployment compensation, $25,000 was requested, we kept that at $25,000. Group insurance expense, requested for $823,570. We actually level funded that from the previous year at $799,000. The one thing that has not happened in about 10 years, I don't know why, is the insurance board has not met and addressed this as insurance across the board. Insurance companies, if they have to compete for our business, we would probably get lower figures than what we've had in the past. Insurance deductible, we put no deductible. Last year it was $2,000. So for the total insurance would be $1,046,497 versus the requested $1,068,067. General government, town technology expense. Requested $8,700. The advisory board put in $7,500. Town telephone expense. Requested $12,500. We put in $10,000. Why did we put in that $10,000? Because we see that in consolidation, we won't need as many phones. If we go to the concept of IP phones, it would be cheaper for the community doing that. As we found out, again, looking at what the senior center is doing as far as their phone service. Town website expense. Requested $2,500, put in $2,500. So that gets us down to Worcester Regional Retirement System. The original assessment was $682,149, an increase of about $85,000 to $87,000. At the last, and you're going to end up seeing that we didn't change some of the numbers based upon the selectmen had a meeting, and because the water budget is not on the town warrant, as well as everything being under 164, town council has advised the town that it would be illegal for us to end up having this on our budget since they're under 164. We will probably have to back out their assessment for their retirement, and they will pay that. There's two areas that we have to actually take it out. One would be on the green sheet here, and there's a separate article for that, but we thought in the future, we could start combining these and get down from the number of warrant articles that we have down to getting it on, just like other communities don't have separate articles for stuff like this. It's all on the town's budget per se. I believe the figure that for both for the town would be about $435,000. So that would be, the rest of it would actually be going to the light and water. So that total is $702,149 from the requested amount of $705,849. Total general government was requested as $622,643. That was an increase of 3%, by the way. We got that down to $2,527,746. Next is the police budget. We had a lot of discussion about this because we found out after we started the budget process, our chief is retiring at the end of, in June. As a board, we actually debated how we should end up handling this. Because if internal candidates chosen, that's by contract. We could probably end up having something less than that. But the board chose to keep the same amount as what was requested, $81,242 on both of those. That's something that your Board of Selectmen will have to negotiate with whoever the new chief is. Hopefully, and going into negotiations, I hope prudently they try to think and end up lowering that to help the overall budget, no matter which budget it is. But they're in control of that. Department salaries. Requested $684,349. We put in $584,349. As you can see, that's our first thing that we had to end up hitting public safety.
Can you give us those numbers again, please?
Under the police department expenses, they requested $68,208. That was a 5% increase. On the advisory board, recommended is $55,000. Yes.
I'm sorry, Virginia asked for those next.
The police department numbers.
Virginia.
Could you say them over again, please?
Virginia, the numbers are 81,242, 584, 349,
What was the?
under the next line
What
down.
was the requested when they?
The requested 684,
Okay. That's all I
349.
wanted to know, thank you.
Did you get the next one down?
Yeah. Thank you.
Going on to the fire department. The fire chief's salary is again by contract. There's nothing that we want to attempt to do. I see the chief here. You still have the same amount of money. Requested, the contract is for $62,000. As you can see, the increase was about 25% over what was in the previous year. We kept it at $62,000. For the deputy fire chief's salaries, requested is $4,010. We level funded that at $2,005. For the captains and lieutenants, requested $4,500, an increase of 32%. We allocated under that particular line item $3,700. 45 all fire department salaries. Requested $80,000. Under no override, $60,000. 2 full-time fire EMS salaries, which the town voted for last year. Of 120, this particular figure is fully loaded, is that correct, Chief? Was requested as $128,812. We charged you $12. We actually put in $128,800. Fire department expenses, we requested $60,300. One of the things we did find out that the 300 was the right to know law. You'll see that through